Hey guys, Chris here. Today we have two stories. The first one, in 1983, I was working in Yellowstone National Park, and a friend and I went backpacking, and we had an encounter with a grizzly bear, and it was extremely frightening. And the second story happened in 1984 in Yellowstone National Park. There was a female hiker who went out and had an encounter with a grizzly bear, and it was tragic and fatal. Both stories are related. That's next. All right, I had to get my hike in today. We were going to be in the cabin. Okay, you guys, I am in the cabin tonight, and we had a really nice hike. Okay, for tonight's beer, we have from the Brewer's Cabinet out of Reno, Nevada, Tahoe Amber, Tahoe American Amber. Check that out. And that almost looks like a Bigfoot footprint on there, like a big hairy footprint. But that is Lake Tahoe, not a big footprint. And this is a really interesting beer. I'll tell you why. And we're gonna go right out of the can. All right, here we go. Wow, right away there's this malty flavor, especially in the finish. And it's very smooth and almost a caramel or mocha taste to it, which is really interesting for an amber, but it is. And it says on the can that here's what it says. Rich caramel notes dominate the nose, while Northwest hop varieties balance the sweetness, and subtle toffee and toasty malt flavors make up the body of the beer. Wow. It's very flavorful without being like sweet. There's, like I said, the hops kind of balance it out. So there's this malty toffee taste, and then it kind of smoothens out into a beer flavor. So yeah, really, really good. I like that a lot. So cheers. Okay, so for tonight we have two stories, but they're both related. And one happened to me in 1983, and then a year later, almost to the week, something happened to someone else, but it's totally related to my experience. So back in 1983, I got a job working in Yellowstone National Park with Hamilton Stores, which is no longer there. They have another company that's running the concessions there, but I got a job with them in Canyon Village, which is in the middle of Yellowstone National Park, and it's near the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. It's right there. Just a beautiful location. I went out there in 1983 while I was at the community college in Minnesota, North Hennepin Community College. Just throw that out there. And I remember driving my little pickup across Wyoming and working my way towards the park. I had never seen the Rockies before, and it was June, it had been raining, and the clouds were really thick, and it was just plains for miles and miles and miles, and finally I saw some peaks popping out of the top of the clouds. And I wasn't sure those were actually peaks. I stopped and I got out and I looked and I thought, are those clouds or those peaks? And I realized by looking at the map and figuring out about where I was, those had to be the Rockies. It was really cool. My first impression of the Rocky Mountains. So I went to the park, got checked in at Canyon Village, and I started working for the park. The fountain at Hamilton Stores, really cool place to work. Big general store with groceries and tourist items and t-shirts and everything, and then the backcountry ranger station's over here, and there's another store over here, and Lower Falls. Made some good friends, and four of us decided to go to Pelican Valley and go fly fishing for the day, and then 2 of us were going to go further into the valley and spend the night. And so we went to this Pelican Valley, which is north of Yellowstone Lake, huge lake, 110 miles of shoreline on Yellowstone Lake, and it goes into the thoroughfare region, very wild country down there. It's considered some of the most remote country in the lower 48. We were north of the lake in this vast Pelican Valley, which had the creek running through the middle of it, and pretty gentle rolling hills that worked their way down to the creek, and then ringed by lodgepole pine around that. And this valley is known for having buffalo, elk, deer, even antelope, and grizzly bears in the valley and then around this area. So we went fly fishing for the day, had a great time, came late in the day, and then my friend Pat and what I believe his name was Big Tom, I don't think it was Ed, it was Big Tom, they had to go back to work. They went back to the trailhead, the Pelican Valley trailhead, and Tom and I had backcountry permits to go to White Lake, so we went further into the valley and found a stringent creek and followed the trail up towards this White Lake, which was north of the Pelican Valley. This was a very similar style valley, or kind of valley, and it just kind of sloped in, but it was much smaller and it had pine trees on the sides of it, lodgepole pine, and then the trail following this creek. We're following this for quite a ways. It was a long day. After about 45 minutes, I'm hiking with my backpack on, and I look up and I see Tom about 35 feet in front of me, and he's stopped. And he looks back at me, and he looks up ahead, and then he looks around, and then he quickly takes his backpack, undoes it, takes a belt, and just drops his pack. And he starts, and I can't think of another word for it, scurrying, because kind of this quick jog up this slope, and he just goes, bear, bear, bear. And then he heads to this tree, and then I look up the trail, and I see this large sow grizzly bear coming down the trail straight for me. Not running, moving down the trail like that, but really good size. They had 2 cubs behind her, kind of on the side, moving back and forth, these little cubs. I'm looking at Tom, I'm looking at the bears, I'm looking at Tom, and then I realize, okay, well, I better get moving too. So I take my pack, and I carried it for a ways, and then I headed for the tree that Tom was heading for in this tree line. And then at a certain point, I just dropped my pack, and we were both trying to climb this tree. Tom was first, and it was very awkward. He went a little ways up, and one of the branches broke, and he kind of fell backwards, and he was very panicked, anxious, and we both had our backs turned on the situation behind us where the bears were. And then I climbed up, and we both worked our way through this lodgepole pine and found a decent enough sized branches, maybe 15 feet up. So we finally got settled up in these tree branches, and we turned around and we looked back towards this small valley of Astringent Creek through the boughs of the tree, and we didn't see the bear. We were hoping to see the bear continue to walk through and be gone or go the opposite direction, but in the time that we had our backs turned, it made a move, and who knows where it went. So we're sitting up in this tree not knowing if this bear came into the forest and circled around us, was down in the valley waiting for us. We had no clue. We really wanted to assess the situation and see the bear leave the area, and we didn't. So we're sitting up in this tree for a long time, maybe 45, 50 minutes, just being super careful and cautious. We're listening, we're talking, we're looking around, and we notice the sun is really starting to drop. It's getting late in the day. And so we decided, well, we better get down, get our packs, and go back out the way we came and work our way back to the Pelican Valley trailhead. So we do that, we get down, get situated, we make some noise, we're talking, got our packs on, and we're working our way out. We got into the main valley, Pelican Valley, and again, this valley is very long, very broad, it's vast, and there's herds of buffalo in it, and herds of elk, and it's a wildlife mecca. And so we, at the edge of this valley, we're going to drop into it. We can see the rolling hills and the sagebrush, and we notice what we initially thought was a bison down this slope, up a hill, and then up another hill, maybe a couple 100 yards away. And we see this shape, and we're thinking that's probably a buffalo, and it was walking pretty slow. It was good size. This is dark shape, resembled a buffalo, and we weren't sure though. We just wanted to be sure. So I said, hey Tom, what if I whistled really loud and see what this thing does? And he goes, yeah, let's do that. And so I got this whistle, my mouth, it goes really loud when I blast it. And so I blasted my whistle, and this thing we thought potentially was a buffalo stood up on 2 feet. And we're like, oh my gosh, that's another grizzly bear. And the grizzly bear stood up and is trying to hear us, smell us, catch our scent, anything. And then it dropped down on all fours and it started galloping, and then it kind of disappeared between the hills. We're like, oh my gosh, there was a bear right in our route as we're heading back towards Pelican Valley Trailhead. And the sun is going down. We look off to the south and east of us, and we see on this other slope, this way, 2 of very similar kind of shapes running down this slope like this, kind of hunched over. We're like, there's 2 more grizzly bears right there. It looked like a grizzly bear convention is what we said. I remember that we said grizzly bear convention. And we were really at a loss for what to do because the sun was going to be down. It was going to be dark soon. And we were heading right into this valley with no trail, not adequate lighting. Back then, we didn't have these 1,500 lumen headlights like we have now. And pepper spray. We did not have pepper spray back in those days. And so we're thinking, what can we do? I guess we just continue on, but we could be in darkness and be heading right into this valley with bears moving around up and down this creek or whatever the heck they're doing, not to mention bison and other animals. And so just when we were kind of not sure what to do, we look further up the valley, which was almost straight east, kind of bending around to the east. We see off in the distance this light. And we stare at it, and it looks like a campfire. We know this is really remote country. There's no villages or there's nothing back there. Seeing the color, we could see some movement on it, just a little bit of movement with white and yellow and orange. We thought, this got to be a fire. It's got to be a campfire. It's got to be other people that backpacked in and they got a campfire. And when it's night out and there's nothing obstructing your view, you can see like a campfire for miles. And we had no idea how far away this was. We're guessing maybe mile and a half away. And we thought that's our best bet, is to head for this light and hope there's some people there and it's not something a mirage or something, I don't know. But hoping we find some people and we could spend the night there. So we start hiking towards this campfire light in the Pelican Valley. It gets dark pretty quickly after that. Got our lights, we're talking loud, and we just continue on for seemed like a long time. We finally get to the edge of this camp, and we were about 35, 40 feet away, and we kind of yell out, hey, how's it going? We just had some bear experiences, bear encounters, and we just wanted to ask if we could spend the night right near you guys here in this camp here, and And they said, oh, no problem. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, come on in. And so we set up our tents and joined these guys at their campfire. They gave us some food. It was really appreciated. And that's how we got through that. And I don't know how we would have made it otherwise if we had to walk out. We'd have to find the trail, hook up with the trail, and then follow that through the forest for a few miles as well to get back to the trailhead. So that is how we got through that one. This next story is disturbing, unsettling, and even graphic in some parts of it. And I just wanted to put that out there as a warning. So you do whatever you got to do. In 1984, July 29th, in the Yellowstone Lake area backcountry ranger station, Gary Youngblood was on duty. He was the ranger. And in walks a young woman who was 5'5", 120 pounds approximately, with long brown hair. Her name was Brigitta Fredehagen. She came in to get a backcountry permit for north of Pelican Valley, where I was almost a year earlier. Right away, Ranger Youngblood warned her about the dangers of solo backpacking in Yellowstone because of the grizzly bears. But there was no hard rules that said she couldn't do that. They just gave her a warning. They gave her a lot of information on the bears and what they do and what to expect and how to handle her food and to make sure her food is properly hung over a bear pole with the rope. That's where you tie your food bag and you throw it over a bear pole and then you secure it so it's up off the ground so the bears can't get it. So she was well versed in how to handle herself in bear country. They gave her the permit for Fern Lake. 5B4 was the campsite, which is about 8.5 miles in and up from the Pelican Valley, up a stringent creek, the same creek I went up with Tom, and we were heading to White Lake. This was July 29th. 2 days later, July 31st at 6 p.m., same ranger station, Ranger Mike Marshall was on duty, and in walks a young man named Andreas Fredehagen. He came in to report that he was to pick up his sister, Brigitta, at the Pelican Valley trailhead earlier that day. She never showed up. They were really concerned, not sure what happened, and not necessarily saying she was a missing person, but they had seen her and they expected her earlier. Ranger Marshall filed a report and they sent 2 people out on foot the next morning to go through the valley and see if she's just hanging out, maybe spend an extra day, who knows what. They came back, they did not see her, find her, nothing. So Mike Marshall went out the following day after that into the Pelican Valley on horseback, worked his way through the valley, up a stringent creek, and he was heading for Fern Lake, but he thought he'd stop off at White Lake, which is where Tom and I were heading in my earlier story. And along the edge of the lake, on the north side, in a small meadow, about 60 feet from the shore of White Lake, he sees this green dome tent. He's on horseback, so he proceeds and works his way towards this dome tent. He gets to a point where his horse does not want to go any further. It stops. The horse was very unsettled. It was snorting. It wouldn't go any closer than about 20 yards from this tent. Ranger Marshall gets off the horse and proceeds to head towards this tent. As he's walking, there's a slight breeze. And he notices there's rip marks on the tent next to the door, just kind of shredded. And the light breeze is the fabric of the tent's flapping in the wind. He looks to his right, his left. He doesn't see anything. He doesn't see anybody. He yells out for Brigitta. Doesn't get a response. Walks around the back side of the tent. And as he's walking around the tent, he finds some blood, it looked like muscle tissue, and some hair just on the ground. He went a little further and he found a sleeping bag on the back side of this tent on the northwest side, and it looked dirty, kind of laying there in the grass and sagebrush, and it had this kind of puncture mark on it. He knows there's a problem, so he radios ahead, backcountry ranger station, for some backup. Continues walking, he heads over to where the bear pole is. He notices that the backpack that had been hung up was now lying in the ground, and the backpack was ripped open somewhat, and the food that was in there was partially eaten. He looked at the bear pole, and he could see scratch marks on the bear pole, like a grizzly bear had used it for support and was able to get to the backpack. At about 12 o'clock, the helicopter landed with 2 rangers as backup. They got out, they were briefed by Ranger Mike Marshall as to the latest situation. It had rained a couple nights earlier, and unfortunately the rain had washed any tracks away. So they started their search, and they started to go out farther and farther to look for anything. They went about a quarter mile from the tent, and one of the rangers found an article of clothing that had blood on it. The situation looked really grim. They continued to go in this direction and went into the forest. They found some tracks because the trees protected it from the rain, and they followed those a little further into the forest, and they saw some disturbed dirt, and it looked like something half buried there. Turned out it was Brigitta Fredehagen, and she had been partially buried by the bear. She was 258 feet from her tent. It appeared the bear had eaten a lot of her. They were quite shaken by this discovery, but continued with their investigation. They needed to determine what happened to Miss Fredehagen. They found some more footprints, they found some more evidence, made notes of it. They even made maps and diagrams to show exactly what they found and how they believe it possibly happened. The rangers determined, and it appeared that Brigitta was in her sleeping bag on the night of July 30th while it was raining, sometime after 10:30 to 11:30, almost midnight. And that is when this grizzly bear ripped through her tent, the back of her tent, and grabbed her with its teeth by the neck and shoulders and dragged her out of the tent while she was in her sleeping bag. And at about 6 feet from the tent, she was pulled out of her sleeping bag, and the bear continued to drag her towards the forest. And 8 feet after this point where the sleeping bag was, they found substantial blood in the ground there, and they determined this is where she died. Now, most likely, according to the rangers, she was sound asleep or she was unconscious when she died, and she died quickly. 2 park rangers spent several nights right in this area in a bear trap. And what a bear trap is, it's this large, almost like a culvert with a cage door on either end, and then the bear can get trapped in them, and they use this as protection to spend the night and see if they could find this bear, if the bear was going to return. The bear never returned. They did find bear scat a few miles away in the following days as they continued with their investigation, and this bear scat had human remains in it. This bear was never found. Also, the brother and sister found a diary that was given to them after this had happened from Brigitta, and in the diary it eerily said that she had taken all the precautions. And the only thing they really determined was that she was by herself, and the bear sensed something, that it smelled something, and it attacked. But grizzly bears can be very aggressive and very dangerous compared to black bears. They're very unpredictable. And so this was exactly the lake that Tom and I, a year earlier, were hiking to when we had our bear experience, bear encounter, in Yellowstone National Park. And that's why it's so frightening for me. Once this news broke of this, while I was working in the park the following summer, and we learned exactly what had happened, we realized how close we possibly came to having something happen to us. You never know, especially when you're in grizzly bear country. So that is our stories about Yellowstone. I just thought I would do some stories, a couple of stories about some experience I had that did not involve Bigfoot. We got a new year coming up, and I'm looking forward to it. I got a lot of stories coming up, and we're looking at some different stories to do as well. So I want to hear some stories that you guys might want to hear. So put them in the comments down below. I'd love to hear it. So all right, you guys. All right, you guys. Thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Appreciate you. We'll see you in the next one. Be strong, be kind. Keep hiking.